Yeah, you're very welcome along to OTB AM. We're with you every morning from 7:30 until 10. If you've just joined us, you've missed a great half hour in the company of Paul Regs, which is available for download on all of our podcasts. You can get it on the OTB Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcast. Best place, obviously, offtheball.com. Eoin Sheehan, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Very well, Ger. What's the crack?
It's busy out morning. There's plenty going on. Plenty of people out talking about stuff and, trying to capture where we're going next in all of this and when we might have some return to play. Yesterday was like, return to play. We've got ideas. This is what's going to happen. And today is the backlash against that. And tomorrow there'll be the backlash against the backlash. And so the cycle continues.
I wonder if the response from Irish and British sporting bodies is going to be as widely differing as the Irish and British government response to COVID-19 in the first place.
Go on.
Well, I know we're not comparing like when we're comparing the GAA with the financial behemoth that is the Premier League, but it is quite interesting when you look at, say, the back page of the Irish Examiner this morning and compare that with the back page of the Guardian this morning, where the UK government is aiming to have football up and running, and then in Ireland we have John Horan absolutely abhorred by the idea that there were plans afoot or rumours of plans afoot to actually get football and hurling back underway.
All of this is guesswork, but it seems as if there were some kind of conversations happening at government level in a government department, potentially in a room with two people going, geez, I wonder how that might work. And then that became a memo, which became something, which became a briefing, which became a story. And nobody at any point kind of rang up the GAA and said, here, lads, we're having a few ideas. Do you want to knock heads on us? And you can see how, as an organisation, if you're being spoken about but not involved in those conversations, there might be some reticence to accept what is being said, particularly when it doesn't actually have a core plan in place first and it doesn't have any of the caveats that you would have. Let's assume everything is okay and then this is how we're going to gradually get back to action, as opposed to the government demanding the GAA test all its inter-county players and cocoon them away, and because that was obviously never going to make any sense.
No, it wasn't. I find it interesting as well. I think, for the record, by the way, I think that John Horan is right to be coming out and putting his foot down and saying that we're not going to go back until the government says it's safe to do so, and that people perhaps were getting a bit carried away with themselves. I'm just kind of commenting on how interesting the comparison is with the UK. But what I found very interesting was that Horan committed to the fact that the club game is far more likely to come back, that the priority will be on the club game, and that there will be a return to club action before inter-county action, which is it's a fairly big commitment from the president of the organisation, given, I know without packed stadiums, of course, the inter-county game is not as lucrative, but there is still television money, there is still some financial positives to be taken from the inter-county game coming back first. I'm not saying it should come back first, but I'm just saying that if you're running an organisation, it's a big commitment to say that the club game is going to be the first one back.
It just feels like that's again, everything is going to be a graduated return, right? No matter what happens, even if there was a vaccine, everybody won't get the vaccine. There won't be enough for the whole world to get it in the first 6 weeks. Even if there is an antiviral treatment, then it's going to take a long time for the specific elements of that to be made available to the public. And at what point do we get it in Ireland, and how do you prioritise who gets it? Well, obviously healthcare workers get it first and the vulnerable get it. So we're miles and miles and miles away from that being widely available. Local sports action is going to be the first thing to return. So you're coming back that way. The top-down approach is only possible. It's going to be possible in the NBA, for example, where you've got very small playing squads. That's the most viable international league at the moment, it would seem to me. There's talk about Formula One perhaps having races behind closed doors, but how do the pit crew all work together? I suppose they're dressed in the equivalent of hazmat suits and they could all have oxygen. But the notion that we were going to catapult inter-county first before everything else, it's a dream. Obviously, it would be amazing if we could get inter-county back under strict protocols so that we would have stuff to look at. But from a health and well-being thing, it was always going to be the club, small units progressing to a point where they were able to play. And if you go back to the conversation we had with Luke O'Neill, I know I keep bringing this back up, but he's talking about small groups and under 30s perhaps being first back. Like that's miles and miles away from having club championships or any of that kind of stuff, or club league games that everybody's going to accept in terms of standings. Can you be relegated if you lose a series of league games when, somebody in the vicinity catches coronavirus and all of a sudden fixtures get scrubbed? Like, are we going back to a point where all sport is essentially for participation and the whole notion of knockout and it counting for things? Like, is that the direction we're heading?
I don't know. Like, I think Oren touched on the point about community being the priority, and that getting the biggest positives for your community back first is the main reason why club will come back first. I think that the belief that inter-county might be the first one to come back was obviously based on the view from abroad, which is seeing the big leagues, as you mentioned, the NBA, the Premier League, Bundesliga, all making moves to actually come back. But in reality, it's not comparable whatsoever. And Horan did rule that out yesterday, in fairness, saying that cocooning players just won't be an option. They'll have to go back to their families. They'll have to go back to their workplace, and they just can't put any of those players away for a while. So it's not going to be a top-down approach as it is in the UK, for example, and that's where the big difference is. I think it's just the fact that it's an amateur game. If these were fully paid professionals, it could be a different situation. And you'd wonder then, like, if you look at other sports, if you look at, say, perhaps how Leinster and Munster and Connacht and Ulster might actually come back to play, perhaps that is a top-down approach rather than looking at amateur rugby in this country. Yeah,
so what do you think might happen there? What conversations do you imagine are happening around rugby?
Well, it's the same conversations they're having in the Premier League, I presume. That how do we actually create a safe situation for matches to take place once there is an ability to realise that the health service isn't under as much pressure as it might have been at one stage this year, when we can actually have emergency services at games. And basically, I would say that once a league around one league around Europe comes back and has pulled it off after a couple of weeks, there might be a little bit of a ripple effect. Like, perhaps rugby is a very different situation because of the nature of the game, and it's the ultimate contact sport. And as you say, Formula One, golf might actually have a better chance. But like, I still don't even know with some of those, with the contact hours you'd have away from the sport itself. So I don't know, it definitely has a better chance than GAA of coming back quicker, because you can just put these professionals into a specially designated hotel for a little while because it is their job.
Yeah, and like how difficult or otherwise that might be, they can negotiate and navigate that a little bit down the line. So just to talk about rugby, right, for the sake of idle speculation of a Tuesday morning at 8:10, the scrum happens, right, and somebody in one scrum, it turns out, is a carrier but is asymptomatic, and the next week the entire scrum has it. Like, what happens in that circumstance where you've decided that you're going to restart a competition, but suddenly an entire forward pack is laid low? Like, what happens next?
Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's a kind of a shutdown situation, is it not? It's like, we've screwed up here. This was a risk that we knew was going to happen, that if one person contracts it, it just sets the whole thing back. Like, I know this, if you want to bring up various scientific theories, that is a situation where that is why you're putting sport back first, is because these are young, healthy individuals who might be able to withstand such a thing. But I would have thought that it's the possibility of a second wave is just such a huge thing. Like, you even had Michal Briody coming out yesterday talking about his business engagements in Singapore, I think it is, and how that he's seeing his business dealings in Far East Asia actually kind of peak and trough, because there could be the risk of a second outbreak and recurring cases. So, like, it's a shutdown case, isn't it? Are you suggesting something else?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder, do all the rugby teams have enough players to have an A team and a B team, or a mixture of, like, so this group of players, if they become infected, will never meet this group of players, but this group of players will have to kind of try and remain. And so that only works if Team A gets impacted and Team B doesn't. But there's nothing to stop Team B getting impacted through community transmission, So Leinster obviously have a big enough squad to do that, and probably the Irish provinces do it. Well, Connacht, after all of their injuries last year, may suddenly have enough players who ended up with enough experience. But like, it's not a straightforward path. And maybe, I don't know, maybe the point about these professional sports is that they're at some point they're going to seek to have all of their players get the antibodies. Like, and again, we don't even know scientifically that that's going to be the thing that prevents people from getting reinfected. So it's a fairly tricky thing for sports to work out.
Extremely tricky. Like, I don't think there's any easy solution here. Like, even the possibility of that happening in the Premier League, like, that is, like, that's a remarkable tightrope to be walking, isn't it? That's if their agreement is that if we have one outbreak, the whole thing shuts down.
But
then,
maybe
like,
don't shut it down if there's an outbreak. Maybe you just live, like, so sport is going to have to coexist, and teams are going to have to fulfill fixtures with youth players or younger players or reserve team players or whatever it is. Like, the whole point of having that under-23 league, like, you know, it's totally, obviously, totally different for professional sport, and it's kind of even graduated depending on the size of the league and the size of the teams and the size of the money that is involved in the clubs. Are the players going to be happy going out and playing against opposition knowing that there's a possibility they're going to end up getting coronavirus? Unlikely, right?
Like, I really think that there is, in all of these situations, for now, like, we're not talking about 1 year down the line when we have more scientific evidence. Like, as you say, there are certain up in the air theories about antibodies, for example. Like, do we just proceed as if some of the theories are kind of fully proven? Like, I don't know. I would have thought that as a situation that if there is one outbreak, it's done. Like, it's curtains on the league. And if the Premier League, as it's been said in the UK government over the last couple of days, if it is their aim to get back quickly, like, even if it's in a month, 2 months time, even at that point, you'd have to suspect that it's one case and the whole thing is shut down. There's no way the health services in Ireland and the UK could possibly be in a situation where it's like, yeah, we can take this risk.
So the risk of somebody getting the virus, or somebody being seriously ill, somebody dying from the virus, is that?
But somebody getting the virus and that trying to limit any sort of contact and trying to limit the spread of the virus is still a huge priority for the health services. It is now. Like, there's no suggestion that it won't be a huge priority in a month's time. There won't be a suggestion that it won't be a huge priority in 2 months' time. Like, what you're saying is that there could be scientific evidence that it might not actually be as big a concern for a certain demographic of the population in a period of time. I just suspect that period of time won't have elapsed in 1 or 2 months, which means the initial start of the Premier League, as is being proposed for June or for July, if we just say July for now, I just still think that comes with the caveat that if you have one case, it just shuts the whole thing down. Does it not? Like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure if that's an achievable scientific outlook by July.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And I wonder if everybody just everybody signs up on the basis that these are the risks. You know what the risks are. For the Premier League, obviously, we're talking here, not GAA, but that everybody goes, well, you're not going to get paid, we're not going to get paid. The whole thing, these clubs are going to disappear. This sport disappears if we don't get something up and running. And do you sign away the waiver that goes, yeah, okay, I understand the risks? Like, I don't know. And I don't know what kind of a choice or a decision gets made and how people step in to kind of guarantee that, okay, we're going to protect the sport because these are important institutions. We'll talk about that again a little bit later on. 13 minutes past 8. Here's the sports news for now. The FAI will not be receiving €4.3 million that will be distributed by UEFA to member associations during the pandemic. The €236 million is being made available without conditions to cover essential costs. The money comes from UEFA's hat-trick programme, but the FAI were already advanced the funds for this programme earlier than usual back in 2018. Spurs players will be allowed access to the club's training complex in Enfield in London from today, so hopefully that's the end of the Spurs Covidiot stories of them training out in various parks. Only one player will be allowed on a pitch at any one time, with a restricted number allowed to conduct running sessions each day. Several Spurs players, along with Jose Mourinho, had to be reminded of their social distancing duties over the past month. Arsenal, Brighton and West Ham have also made their training grounds available in limited circumstances. Belgian clubs have postponed a vote deciding on whether or not to end their season prematurely. Bruges look set to be crowned champions, after the Pro League's Board of Directors proposed an early finish, but the clubs will now meet next Monday as they await further clarity from the Belgian government. Dutch officials have called an early halt to their season last Friday, which has led to threats of legal action from various clubs. In rugby, Stuart Lancaster has warned that baby steps are required as rugby officials implement a return plan. It's unlikely any games will be played until late summer at the earliest. The Leinster senior coach says player welfare needs to be the priority as various bodies begin redrawing the fixture calendar. We're going to get into that in the papers as well, what the back-to-back GAA seasons might look like. Sports pages coming your way right now. And Daniel Harris is going to join us to talk to us about Manchester United's transfer off-season, what a redrafted Man United might look like next year. How's the head today is Cara Healy from Laois. Lake, we're talking about the brilliant GPA Club Energise ad that revolutionised how people thought about GAA players from Arthur James O'Dea has done an oral history of that. And off the bull, the Rodman special. Was it 2 episodes of Rodman? Was it 1 episode of Rodman?
Yeah, he was fairly prevalent in both episodes. Yeah, it's a lot of that, a lot of Pistons and a lot of Phil Jackson.
Okay, so that's the weekly review that we're doing every Monday night stroke Tuesday morning, goes out on OTB AM with Jarlath Regan, Kieran Donaghy, Ronan Mullen and Owen. Now though, time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
So we're obviously going to start with offtheball.com. Belgian clubs postpone vote that could end season early. I guess there's no real rush at this point. So they're going to wait until Bank Holiday Monday, next Monday, to have that meeting. People are very nervous. SIBO on lockdown in Paris. There's hardly a club in the world that makes money. This is Matt Williams talking about World Rugby and how basically screwed the entire industry is because it's been badly organised and badly run from the start. Spurs to allow players limited access to training complex. We just covered that story. And history shouldn't be a sanitised fable of a nation's glories. More brilliance from Paul Rouse, as you might have seen if you joined us from 7:30 this morning. But that full lecture series is going to make for compelling viewing and a real education for all of us. An opportunity to access the inner workings of one of the great minds of Irish sports history. What's next with you, Owen?
The Irish Independent leads with a photograph of a few dejected Republic of Ireland players. UEFA's €4.3 million advanced payment that is already spent. So Ireland are going to be precluded from the fund that is going to come from the UEFA kitty. There'll be a cash injection for most football associations around the continent, but not Ireland. They've already got that money. They've already spent that money for fairly obvious reasons. GPA to reduce financial demands on GAA as world has changed, writes Donica Boyle. This is Kieran Barr, the GPA's head of finance, who has admitted the world has changed with regards to ongoing funding negotiations with the GAA, which might suggest that they won't be looking for as big an amount of cash as they usually look for at the end of the season, or on at least a 1-year term. It might come out from the GPA at least. Elsewhere in the Irish Independent, you've got Stuart Lancaster of Leinster, saying he would relish Lions' tour of duty. He says he sees a lot of hurdles to overcome before games return as well. No stopping Cotter after finding her way on road to Rouen, and 2 into 1 may become a reality for GAA. That's Cullen Keyes on the possibility of 2 championships in 1 year.
The Irish Times there this morning is FAI cashed UEFA payment in 2018. It's a very spare headline, and it's loads of money coming. Oh, balls, we already spent it. And then Lancaster says Leinster will keep ahead of the curve. And F1 plans to start season in July with Austria doubleheader. So doubleheader Grand Prix. I mean, if you've got a venue that can take a Grand Prix, why not have doubleheaders? It just strikes me that they'd be very similar, wouldn't they? Is that not? Is the whole point about the tracks moving? Not that it's going to be different this week from next week. Are you not going to get exactly the same results essentially if you do the same Grand Prix twice?
Well, yeah. Well, I would assume so. Unless you could. I don't know how you I kind of had in my head when I saw that Formula One was going to come back. It's just going to be Monaco will become Formula One world forever, and they will just have.
Good idea.
If we're going to lock down hotels for Premier League stars, they can definitely lock down Monaco
and the boats.
It's basically already on lockdown anyway. It's already its little secluded place. So
they all live there.
They all live there, and just crack on with that. They could share cars for the greater good. It could be Lewis Hamilton in a non-Mercedes car for one race, Mercedes for one race. Like, actually, let's determine who is the pound for pound best driver in Formula One. That could be something they could do.
Good idea. What's next?
But it's obviously not going to happen. Back page of the Herald is UEFA cash spent. FAI won't get €4.3 million as money was already drawn down. And the same story there as well from the GPA. The world has changed, says GPA chief Barr. And then also greatest Dublin sporting events today. Number 9, the 1998 international rules. And then they're on to number 8 tomorrow. I don't remember the 1998 international rules.
I'm stunned that anybody anywhere has put an international rules game on any top 10 list.
05 in fairness was 05, wasn't it? The one with the
if you want a box, say one a box, my box.
Yeah, like I think that's actually a really good shout, the international rules, but I don't recall 98 myself, so I'm sure it's deserving of its place.
It's very brave. It's very brave. The here is the Examiner for you this morning. GAA and DTS chiefs fume over claim players will get priority testing. And I was like, DTTS. Okay, say it is the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport. It trips off the tongue. Leading officials within the GAA and the department are irate at the solo run, which gave the impression the testing of inter-county players would be prioritised so as to facilitate a return to training. Speculation across the weekend that the DTTS was considering the establishment of a player-focused COVID-19 testing regime to enable the resumption of inter-county activity was yesterday described as irresponsible and a nothing story by the GAA president, John Horan. So that was an angry backlash against that. And they also have Mark Brady has shelved his retirement plans. That is an unspoken about aspect of all this so far, that everybody's getting a year of rest in the legs that have a lot of miles on the clock. And teams who have been to the well many times and other such cliches are now getting an opportunity for their bodies to heal. And out of the loop, GAA know the true value of games. That's John Fogarty's piece there today. So we'll come back and talk about some of those stories in a moment.
The Irish Mirror this morning leads with the third degree. Rio queries Ace Pogba's dedication and tells him to be honest with fans. It's a train wreck. Meanwhile, GAA chief aghast over comeback claims. There's a new bidder who's entered the race to take over Newcastle.
Of course there is. At the last minute. There always is.
There always is. The FAI miss out on virus aid, and Premier Chief, are we jumping gun? Which is a question we actually don't seem to have been asked too much in the Premier League at the moment. It is, how do we do this? Not, can we do this?
Emiliano Martinez returning to training. The pictures of all the cars, the players all seem to like Ferraris, it turns out. Sure, why wouldn't you? If you could have one, you would, wouldn't you? The Daily Star this morning, Blank of Ireland, great headline. No new money to ease FAI's cash troubles. The FAI won't see a cent of the near $5 million promised by FIFA and UEFA in the last few days. UEFA yesterday announced the release of a whopping $236 million. Obviously, this is the hat-trick money. We're becoming very familiar with these different terms and the little pockets of cash that were coming the way of the administration. But unfortunately, we've already cashed that cheque. We drew it down. And as for the $462,000 the FIFA announced it would dish out to its members' associations last week, one insider last night said, that's not new money. There is nothing extra for the FAI. So what looked like positive stories certainly have proven not to be. And a picture of Underso at the top there before being sent to France to retire, and GAA county return and no. And Ray Houghton thinks that the Liverpool players will want to win the league season on the field of play, and of course he's right.
The Irish Sun this morning leads with a story about Declan Rice. All hands on deck. Big boys circle for £70 million Rice. Nobody safe in hammer sale. Arsenal, Manchester City and Chelsea thought to be the clubs circling around for Declan Rice at the moment. Formula One chiefs say we want Lou back for good. That is a story you've already mentioned with regards to Formula One. And Premier League has 4 weeks to produce its plan for a return to play, with a picture there of Alexander Seferin. And so a month basically for the Premier League to get its house in order. It's a bit of pressure, is it not, that organisations have a deadline to meet to actually try and get back onto the field of play. But it seems that obviously the Premier League clubs want to do so for themselves anyway, as much as for UEFA reasons, given the financial windfall it'll give them. Yeah,
well, I think putting those deadlines in place will actually make everybody deal with the reality. It's either going to come back and here's our plan, or it's not going to come back, and then we're into the legal issues around finishing a season prematurely and who gets the trophy and how does that work and what about relegation and promotion. So the Daily Mail, back page, Warren Call. It's Warren Ball is the pun. Lancaster is open to joining Lions setup. A question yesterday at the press conference where he was like, yeah, of course, who wouldn't want to join the Lions? Arsenal motor back to training again. A lot of photographers sleazing over young men in their fancy cars. And GAA chief calls training claims irresponsible. So this is John Horan's piece yesterday where he was saying that it was a story on a podcast from RTE apparently where this idea was concocted. So it obviously ran and ended up being what the GAA think is complete nonsense.
The UK Independent this morning leads to that Formula One story. Silverstone, no fans permitted at British Grand Prix. Silverstone owners have confirmed that July's British Grand Prix will not take place in front of fans, as under normal conditions is not possible. And Miguel Delaney writing that football steps up plans for June restart. Premier League clubs have drawn up plans for a more formalised return to training and matches as confidence grows that football can come back by the middle of June.
The Telegraph. Medical experts call for spitting ban. I agree. Wouldn't it be great if at the end of this there was a few things that we all changed? No spitting on the streets. No spitting. Just no spitting generally. Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, yeah, no spitting on the street is the next step. Is it easier to implement in that sense? No spitting on the street is obviously a stupid thing, and that should not be acceptable in any walk of life.
Straight yellow card, immediate yellow card if you're seen spitting, and we'll make it reviewable by Hawkeye or whatever VAR, and anybody caught spitting, straight yellow, straight away, or straight red. Screw that, straight red. It's a risk of life or death. We don't need your spit. Keep your spit to yourself, you scumbag. Keep that phlegmy mucus in your mouth. We don't need to see it or slip on it or for it to land on somebody. Your COVID-infested spit flecking away there. Blech. No thanks. Yellow card, red card. Red card. Give it a red card.
What if the team is out of players because
they all spat?
Yeah, and people on COVID-19 restrictions. This is the worst time to be precluding players from sport of any kind. As you mentioned yourself, the under-14s are going to get a call up at this stage to actually play games. Increasing punishment for things. This is not the time to do so, but I agree with you in a general sense. But wait till 2022 to start implementing it.
No, this is a life or death matter that I will not hear any counter arguments.
Everything should be allowed at this point. Everything should, studs up 2-footed tackles should be allowed. Handballs should be allowed. We need as many players on the pitch as possible because they could start dropping like flies. Studs up 2-footed tackles is going to end up with people being a drain on our health system because they have to go to hospital and get done. X-rays. Operations. I got distracted by the front cover of the business section of the Telegraph is a picture of Diego Armando Maradona, and it's his tattoo, but it's the cigar that he's smoking that's actually the story. Imperial Brand's dividend remains under threat despite the company offloading its hand-rolled cigar operations for $1.1 billion. Analysts have warned Imperial said the sale, which includes brands such as Cohiba, enjoyed over the years by the likes of Diego Maradona, which two privately owned consortia would be used to pay down debts. So Maradona, Che Guevara, a boat and the Argentine flag and the Cohiba worth £1 billion. Hand-rolled cigars, just one brand worth $1 billion. Happy days for cigar makers. And then medical experts call for spitting ban. We did that one, sorry. So government aims to have football up and running. And the other thing is the men of a certain age have hankies. Yeah. Come on. Seriously. It was always a bad idea. But right now, and then you put it back in your pocket and it sits there and congeals or cooks in the little petri dish of your pocket for an hour and a half, and then you take it out again and you put it back. Come on. It was never, ever, ever a good idea. But right now, you should be in prison for that. That's all I'm saying. Just for a couple of weeks, just until you calm down and you see sense. It's a couple of weeks of prison and no spitting, no men's hankies. Enough. Touch of class, though.
No, it's not. It's like a little disease, a little factory of disease, a little factory of sadness in your pocket.
You're putting your own and your family's life at threat by having a handkerchief. But don't forget how classy you look.
If you put it in your pocket and never use it, fair enough. But you don't look classy pulling out an encrusted piece of old cloth, do you? Do you think that's classy? I've
obviously got a lower threshold of what class represents than you do. I think, It speaks to an old-fashioned way of thinking, I guess. Ban handkerchiefs, ban spitting. This has been a rather productive morning for you. Anyway.
We're there. I'm finished. I'm like out the door now. Mic drop. We're gone. The world is fixed. Away we go.
Great. Let's get everything back. Actually, I'm looking forward to this weekend's first round of the Ulster Championship. Back page of The Guardian is a photograph of Nadia Nadim, the Paris Saint-Germain footballer. She's been speaking to Donald McRae. After the game, I helped with kidney surgery, from refugee to PSG, and now training to be a surgeon. Also, football to restart as soon as possible, says Minister in the UK, and F1 to bankroll British Grand Prix so race can go on without fans. There's also a bit of fallout from the Netherlands' decision to end their domestic league. I'm still angry. Lessons from the Netherlands about anguish of a void season. And Jonathan Liu has been writing about why the future of rugby league means so much more than sport.
And the last one for now is the Irish News, and it is Ulster Council aren't expecting provincial senior football championship before November, which is interesting. And talks continue on Premier League resumption. So the Ulster Council aren't expecting a provincial football championship before November. When you think about this, right, and you think about what was said in terms of what Alan Milton said on this show a couple of weeks ago at this point, and what John Horan said yesterday was that they would look at whatever was required. So they want to finish the league because there's 2 rounds of league games left, and it would be a perfect way for everybody to tune up for whatever championship is coming next. Let's assume that it's safe to play, right? Let's assume that it's safe to have enough people in a changing room, and all that kind of stuff is grand. It may be November. It's interesting that they don't think there's going to be any Ulster Championship until November. Do you scrap the provincial championships this year and just have a March Madness style 33 teams, 32 teams, and is it 33 with America? It is, isn't it? So there's no Kilkenny in London, and you've got so it's 33 teams, which is a bit tricky. Or do you keep the provincial and just have straight knockouts from after the provincial, so it's provincials and straight to All-Ireland semi-finals? Or is March Madness not a slightly better idea of, 1 week it's 32 teams, the next week it's 16, the next week it's 8, the next week it's 4, and everybody's on exactly the same curve?
Yeah, like when are you thinking, when is this going to run? And like, are we waiting for all the counties to have their club action done? Because this is if we're talking about the sort of thing, and I'm all for being fanciful about our notions for this year because it's the thing that keeps us going. But we now know from yesterday's comments that there will be club action before county action. So what are we doing? Are we taking a break from the club action to play this?
Well, so what club action will there be? So are we just?
I don't know. I'm looking at what John Horan said yesterday.
Yeah, but he didn't specify that everybody would be allowed to run off their championship and they'd have like 10 weeks to do so. It was like, let's get the clubs up and running and let's everybody play. And maybe we have a weird scenario where those club games are just about people getting together and playing sport, as opposed to it being a life or death, my club versus your club, Shelbyville versus whatever, Springfield, and we're going to kill each other, and it's the most important thing that's ever happened. Maybe it's just like we actually get to play a game, and so promotion and relegation is less important, and maybe our best players can also maybe focus for this week and next week until they get knocked out on intercounty action. Is there any wiggle room here where like it's safe to do so? The first 2 rounds of the league are played as pre-season essentially, and then you just have a March Madness whatever month that is. So if that's November, if that's December, if that's January, if that's February, and at the end of it you do hand out Sam Maguire and Lee McCarthy.
Well, all the counties would need to implement a March Madness style championship within their own counties as well. You need to kind of pass legislation that every game needs to be knocked out in the GAA from here on out if there is going to be any game in the year 2020. And then that way you could have your tune-up with your club and then go straight into intercounty around Christmas time or start of December or whatever. So
or January, February next year.
Or January, February next year. Like, if that's the, like, is that a better alternative than playing next year's league? I think you could do it just before next year's league, which could be a possibility for sure. I think that it's going to be straight knockout, obviously, if we have anything. And I like that idea as well, because like as well, if you have that situation and your first round 16 counties are knocked out, that is 16 championships or county leagues that are freed up.
Yeah,
and there's no need for because you can go straight back. There shouldn't be any situation where county players will need a week or two off to go on the lash or actually recuperate. Like they can go on the lash in their house now and drink their 6-packs or whatever all they want. But later on in the season, it'll be such a condensed thing that actually they could just go straight back into the club scene.
Yeah, but it's like it's like the scene in the Shawshank Redemption where he wades out of the mile of shit and comes through clean the other side. Like everybody will be, I'm playing a game and I'm going to play another game, and the week after that I'm going to play another game, and if you can get me a midweek game I'm going to play that game too, because we haven't had any games in like almost a year at that point.
I was trying to think more about your proposal yesterday about kind of amalgamated teams.
Yeah.
And like how that forms. Like, is there? I don't know. Is there something where it's like backs up against the wall, 2 captains, 4 captains, whatever, and it's like the NBA All-Star game where you have teams picking. Like it's
that.
Like your idea is obviously something that gets you thinking, and it's a cool idea that you would like to see happen. And just for the purposes of the conversation, you would like to say that actually, of course, there's intercounty or competitive club, you would obviously prioritise that first. But I don't know, is there something that if the GAA finds himself in a situation where competitive sport is acceptable come the start of December, and it's like, oh, we've got 3-4 weeks to actually do something with our calendar. Let's perhaps have a celebration of football and hurling at the end of a really shitty year. Let's create this 4-week tournament between all the intercounty players and top club players around Ireland, and let's just pick a few teams and let's go at it. Let's televise it. Let's give money to health services if we're still under the pump. Whatever. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here, but it's certainly something when you mentioned it yesterday, where it's like, there could be an opportunity to do something fairly left field.
Yeah, how cool would the draft be? It would be sensational. Now, obviously, the reason for thinking about that was, again, to go back to the Luke O'Neill conversation. It was like, what if there's only over 30s who are allowed, or under 30s who are allowed to partake in contact sport, or if there's like a specific medical profile that you have to have, that you have to be happy enough to share with everybody that you have this medical profile, and then you have to be happy to go forward. And suddenly there's only like 400 people who can play contact sport in Ireland, and 200 of them are Gaelic footballers. Are we like, no, because there's 1 in Carlow and there's 3 in Dublin and there's 7 in Donegal, it wouldn't be fair to have? This is like, put them all in, have a team, have games, give us something to watch.
Yeah, it would still be cool to kind of siphon them off via geography as well. That like you could have Carlow people and Dublin fans kind of joining together to support East Leinster or whatever it is, and it would be a really beautiful time for East Leinster.
Well, it would be the pale and beyond the pale. That could be the cut-off point. Right, here on Off the Ball, we've been giving kids all around the country the chance to ask our top sports people whatever the hell they want. Brian O'Driscoll and Lee Keegan were the first 2 victims. Simon Zebo is next on the guest list on the OTB Kids Takeover. You can put a question to Simon, just WhatsApp OTB on 087 9 180 180. That's 087 180. And send it in a message, a voice note, or preferably a video. Flip the phone into landscape if you can, and we'll put the very best questions to Simon. Daniel Harris is going to join us to talk football next. But first, here's the former Arsenal defender Lee Dixon talking about the genius of Dennis Bergkamp.